story started when the leader of the SEAL platoon, a man named Ben Edwards, was preparing to execute a mission. At that moment, Ben was stationed in Mosul, Iraq, and his objective was to help the Iraqi Security Forces, or the ISF, drive the ISIS group out of the city. Soon after, Ben's unit linked up with the Iraqi soldiers. Together, they traveled along the lake, where the commander of the Iraqi forces, an operator named Duran, explained that they were scheduled to hold a meeting with the ISIS group on a nearby bridge. The purpose of this rendezvous was to secure the release of 20 local civilians they held captive, who would be exchanged for the captured ISIS deputy leader. Upon reaching the meeting spot, the joint force disembarked from their boat and moved up onto the bridge. They made sure to bring the ISIS deputy leader, a man named Hamid, who would be exchanged for the local citizens. A short while later, the ISIS group arrived and demanded that Duran release Hamid first, and only then would they release the 20 hostages they had. Eventually, Duran and Ben agreed and let Hamid go. After that, the ISIS group released the 20 local civilians. After the exchange, Hamid was picked up by a motorcycle and quickly sped away. However, once Hamid was gone, the ISIS group suddenly launched an attack, bombarding the forces and the hostages they had just released with bullets. The ensuing firefight lasted for a long time, but eventually Ben and Duran's forces successfully neutralized the ISIS attackers on the bridge. Unfortunately, Ben realized that several bombs had been planted across the bridge, and they detonated soon after. Due to the massive explosion, many of the soldiers were killed. 3 months later, Ben was seen training Iraqi soldiers at a U.S. military outpost. Since the incident on the bridge, he had dedicated more time to training the forces, aiming to solidify their attack strategies. There, he was also assisted by a major named Farouk, the new commander of the Iraqi soldiers. After the training that day, Ben received a visit from his friend in the U.S. SEAL teams, James. As it turned out, he had been assigned to help Ben and Major Farouk train the troops. After that, Ben introduced James to Duran, who had been relieved of his duty in the military. This was due to Duran losing one of his legs in the tragic explosion on the bridge. Ben then spent some time chatting with Duran's wife and children, as they had become like family to him. The next day, a CIA agent came to the military base to see Ben and James. The man explained that he was there to give Ben and James a new mission to monitor an individual suspected of supplying weapons to the ISIS group. This person was living in Mosul, specifically in a compound located at the end of a street, so James and Ben should mobilize immediately. In short, Ben and James arrived at the compound disguised as local civilians. However, just as they were about to enter, the CIA agent called, requesting that they abort the mission immediately. They were instantly confused and demanded an explanation. The CIA agent just apologized, claiming that the target they were looking for did not live in that place, but in a neighboring city. Upon hearing that, Ben and James decided to return to the military base. On their way back to the base, Ben received a distressed call from Duran. Through his tears, Duran apologized and then pleaded with Ben to ensure his wife and children were kept safe. Confused, Ben immediately asked what had happened to him, but Duran gave no answer and disconnected the call instead. Behind that, Duran was actually inside the American military outpost, specifically in a mess hall. He deliberately chose a far corner table to distance himself from the other personnel there. While still crying, he muttered his apology before detonating a suicide vest and sending the building into chaos. Sometime later, after the explosion, Ben, James, and Major Farouk rushed to Duran's home, hoping to find his wife and children. Unfortunately, they found the house completely empty. Ben, who had grown quite close to Duran's family, clearly felt devastated and could not fathom why Duran had committed such an act. Finding nothing, they returned to base and held an impromptu meeting with their superior. During the meeting, one of the superiors speculated that Duran might have been a plant for ISIS, intending to destroy the American military base. However, Ben immediately denied that accusation. He said that if Duran really worked for ISIS, he wouldn't have killed himself in a quiet part of the building with no other deaths. Duran seemed to have deliberately chosen the spot to avoid loss of life, suggesting he must have had a reason for his actions. It was not long before Major Farouk arrived with some files. The documents contained photos and data about the explosives Duran had used. It turned out the explosive materials were identical to those frequently utilized by Hamid, the ISIS deputy leader. This discovery strongly indicated that Hamid was the mastermind behind the entire series of bombings. Upon hearing that shocking connection, Ben and James immediately planned to track down Hamid, the man Ben had previously released. After that, Ben requested permission from the CIA agent and his military superiors to pursue Hamid. They granted him permission, but Ben had to bring him back alive. Figuring that that was better than nothing, Ben agreed to the condition, and he prepared to carry out the mission the next day. That evening, Ben and James were seen strategizing with another teammate. Ben informed them that they had successfully pinpointed Hamid's location, which was a residential area on the outskirts of Mosul. The next day, Ben, James, and their team set off to execute the mission to capture Hamid. Upon arrival at the destination, Ben and the others intended to use the front entrance, but they were instead confronted by a group of ISIS members. It did not take long for Ben and his team to neutralize them. They then swiftly moved inside, where they managed to capture Hamid without a fight. At that moment, Ben found two small children wearing hoods who were being held captive in a room. When their hoods were removed, the children were revealed to be Duran's son and daughter. Duran's son explained that his father had been forced to carry out the suicide bombing at the U.S. military base. Hamid had threatened to kill his family if his father did not follow the order. Cruelly, even after his father complied, Hamid still murdered their mother for refusing his inappropriate request. Upon hearing this, Ben was instantly consumed with rage and executed Hamid on the spot. After that, they returned to the military base, bringing only Duran's two children with them. The next day, Ben, James, and the rest of their unit were assembled on the military field. Ben's superior then began to address the consequences for any member who defied a direct order. The superior made it clear that no matter how exceptional the member was, refusal to obey orders would result in immediate dismissal without tolerance. With a heavy heart, the superior announced that Ben had to be discharged from the SEALs because he had failed to follow orders the previous day. While he was supposed to bring Hamid back alive, he had instead executed him, clearly against the order. As for James and the soldiers who carried out the mission with Ben, they only received a few days' suspension. At that moment, one of Ben's subordinates named Hastings decided to resign from the SEALs. He said that he simply could not continue running missions without Ben's leadership. Following that request, the superior also discharged him. Later, before returning to the United States, Ben thanked James for having been his partner all this time. After that, both Ben and Hastings were transported to the airport via helicopter. Upon their arrival at the airport, Ben and Hastings found out that all flights headed to the U.S. were delayed due to bad weather. As a result, they were stranded at the terminal, waiting for the skies to clear. But rather than just sitting around waiting, Ben eventually suggested that they go to a nearby bar instead. While Ben was ordering a drink, he was suddenly approached by a man named Jed, who for some reason knew that Ben and Hastings had been discharged from the SEALs. Furthermore, Jed even knew of the incident where Ben had killed Hamid. Driven by curiosity, Ben brought Jed to his table where Hastings was already seated. After taking his seat, Jed then explained that he was an agent for the United Nations, and currently, he was in dire need of exceptional operators like Ben and Hastings to recruit for his team. If they accepted the offer, Jed promised a salary way greater than what they had earned before. Moreover, the missions still had some connection with the ISIS group. Ben immediately asked what the mission was. Jed revealed that the assignment was to capture a man named Masood, who was an expert bomb maker for ISIS. Upon hearing that mission, Ben instantly accepted the mission. Hastings, however, stated that he needed time to think it over. Shortly after, Hastings was swimming when Jed approached him and asked why he had hesitated to take the job offer. Hastings replied that he craved a peaceful life and no longer wished to be involved in any war. Jed countered by stating that a person like Hastings would never find peace. Even if he returned to America, he would never find a calm life there and would eventually seek some action. Those words finally convinced Hastings, and he agreed to accept Jed's invitation. The next day, Ben and Hastings were taken to Jed's headquarters in Austria, where they met with Jed's assistant and discussed the mission to capture Masood, the ISIS bomb maker. Jed informed them that they would start their mission that very night. Their objective was to capture Masood alive, who was rumored to be conducting an illegal arms deal at a nearby nightclub. To execute the mission, they would be assisted by one of Jed's operatives named Eliza, who was already working undercover as a bartender in that place. Long story short, Ben and Hastings were seen inside the targeted nightclub, where they approached Eliza, Jed's operative, who was disguised as the bartender. Eliza explained that she would secretly slip a laxative into Masood's drink to force him to the restroom. Once he was there, Ben and Hastings would arrest and take him away. Soon after, Eliza initiated her plan, as Masood was conveniently sitting at his table. Unfortunately, Masood became suspicious of her and suddenly demanded that she drink the drink first. Not wanting to ruin the mission, she was forced to swallow the drink, which immediately gave her a crippling stomachache. As Eliza made her way to the restroom, one of Masood's bodyguards began following her. Luckily, Hastings spotted this and quickly neutralized the bodyguard in silence, while Ben saved Eliza. She was given the antidote, and after taking it, she urged Hastings and Ben to pursue Masood, who was preparing to leave the place. While in the parking lot, Ben received an order from Jed to change the mission from capturing Masood alive to an assassination. Taking this new order, Ben, Hastings, and Eliza immediately proceeded to attack Masood and his subordinates. The mission went smoothly as they managed to neutralize all of Masood's men, leaving only Masood himself standing. Then at one point, Hastings finally eliminated Masood brutally, completing the mission that night. The next day, Ben and Hastings were seen practicing at the shooting range behind Jed's headquarters. It appeared that after successfully finishing the previous mission, Jed was already preparing to give them a new assignment. Somewhere else, the ISIS leader was meeting with an Iranian official. It turned out that the official intended to purchase bombs and weaponry from the ISIS leader. However, the transaction was not going as expected, because Masood, who had always been ISIS's primary bomb maker, had suddenly vanished, not knowing that Masood had been killed by Hastings. Meanwhile, back at Jed's headquarters, Ben and Hastings were informed that their team would have some new members. Shortly after, a car driven by Eliza arrived, and the new team members came out of the car. The first was, surprisingly, Major Farouk, the Iraqi soldier, whose presence made Ben and Hastings happy. Jed then explained that Major Farouk had retired from the military and had joined his team. He revealed that he and Farouk had known each other for so long, and it was actually Major Farouk who had initially suggested that Jed recruit both Ben and Hastings. The second member was Boozer, a former SEAL and one of Ben's subordinates. Finally, the last addition was a man named Jules, an exceptionally skilled former sniper. From this point on, the team was finally complete. Next, Jed welcomed everyone inside, where he would brief them about their next mission. Before the meeting started, Major Farouk approached Ben and presented him with a photo of Duran's two children. He explained that the children had been safely transported to the United States and could now live securely there. Upon hearing the good news, Ben thanked him and said that he would look after Duran's children once he returned to America. Jed soon showed up and began the mission briefing. He explained that after checking Masood's cell phone, they had discovered two important messages. The first was from a woman inviting Masood to meet her at a hotel in Budapest, and the second was an important message from a nuclear scientist who wanted to conduct a transaction with Masood. After mentioning that, he assigned the team to first deal with the woman at the hotel in Budapest, and after that, they would handle the nuclear scientist. Understanding the instruction, Major Farouk, Ben, and the team immediately headed to Budapest to begin the task. Long story short, the team had arrived in Budapest and started their mission. Major Farouk was seen sipping coffee at a cafe, monitoring the woman who had asked Masood to meet. On the other hand, Ben and the rest of the team were positioned in some locations while keeping an eye on Major Farouk from a distance. Soon after, Major Farouk reported to Jed that the target woman did not appear to pose any threat, but even so, to ensure she would not cause problems for them in the future, Jed commanded Major Farouk to simply eliminate her. Shortly after, the woman left the cafe and proceeded to the hotel. Major Farouk immediately followed closely behind. Sometime later, the woman arrived at the hotel. However, when she opened the room door, Major Farouk was already inside, aiming a weapon at her. This terrified the woman, who immediately asked what she had done wrong. Major Farouk instead asked her what her relationship with Masood was. The woman then explained that Masood was her father, and she was simply trying to find him because he had not been in contact lately. Upon hearing this, Major Farouk realized the woman was innocent and did not deserve to die, as she clearly knew nothing about Masood's crime. Finally, he explained that Masood was dead and advised her to stop searching for him. He also urged the woman to disappear immediately and never return. Following that, Major Farouk left and found Boozer, who was monitoring from outside the hotel. He pretended that he had killed the woman, meaning their first mission was complete. The team then returned to their base camp as it was late at night. At the base camp, Jed explained that their next mission was to deal with the nuclear scientist the following afternoon. He briefed that Major Farouk would impersonate Masood's envoy and conduct the transaction with the scientist. Meanwhile, Ben and the others would simply monitor everything from afar. The next day, the team was seen moving into position to monitor the scientist. On the other hand, Major Farouk used his phone to contact the scientist and arranged to meet at a cafe. It was not long before the nuclear scientist arrived. According to their plan, Major Farouk pretended to be Masood's envoy, and fortunately, the scientist believed him. Major Farouk then asked if the scientist had any products he brought, as Masood had sent him to acquire the scientist's best wares. The scientist explained that he had created a synthetic device. He explained that it was a small component that could make a uranium enrichment centrifuge spin significantly faster, allowing anyone attempting to assemble a nuclear weapon to complete the process quickly in less than a year. The item was priced at $55 million, and he asked Major Farouk if Masood would be buying it. Realizing the device's importance, Major Farouk agreed to the purchase. However, he explained that Masood would be transferring the money as he was merely the envoy. The scientist, fortunately, accepted this arrangement, but stated that he would not hand over the device until the funds had been confirmed. Meanwhile, Jed immediately transferred to the scientist. However, due to the large sum, the transaction would take several minutes to process. At the same time, a group of unknown individuals suddenly arrived, clearly aiming to seize the device from the scientist. Ben and the team were momentarily confused, wondering who these people were and how they knew about the transaction. Jed only told them that this was not the time to investigate and ordered them to immediately intercept the group. The transaction was soon finalized, allowing Major Farouk to immediately grab the device and leave. Unfortunately, he was followed by some unknown men, so he went into a convenience store, grabbed a hammer and used it to defend himself. After successfully eliminating the two men, he exited the store and was picked up by Jewel, who was waiting in a car. On the other hand, Ben was chasing another member of the unknown group into a train station. He was shocked when he spotted that his teammate Boozer was already dead, and he immediately suspected that the man he was chasing was the one who killed Boozer. He quickly pursued the killer as he boarded a train. Once inside, Ben called Jed's assistant and requested that she disable the CCTV cameras in the area. After all the cameras were disabled, he immediately approached the man and executed him in plain sight. He then photographed the corpse and fled the train before the police arrived. The next day, Jed was seen packing up all the belongings of the deceased Boozer. Ben and Hastings were also present, still mourning the loss of their fallen comrade. Jed then told them that they should not dwell on their grief, as death was nothing strange in their field of work. He also added that any team member who died would not receive a grand funeral or public homage. The fallen would only be a secret memory carried in the minds of the remaining members. A little while later, the team was seen having lunch. At that moment, Jed explained that thanks to the photo Ben took yesterday, he had identified the group targeting the device created by the scientist. They turned out to be Iranian mafia members led by a man named Khalid, the boss of an Iranian crime syndicate specializing in the black market sale of nuclear components. This was precisely why Khalid was after the synthetic device, as it was a critical component for nuclear creation. The major remaining puzzle, however, was how Khalid knew they were conducting the transaction with the scientist. Armed with the name they found, Jed then ordered the team to ambush Khalid at a tunnel on the Swiss border, as he had found out that Khalid would be trading nuclear components there the next afternoon. Their objective was to eliminate Khalid and seize his nuclear components. Upon hearing that, Hastings questioned why they needed to ambush Khalid in a tunnel, arguing that it might endanger civilians around there. Jed simply replied that the tunnel was always deserted, meaning there would be no civil casualties. Knowing that, the entire team immediately prepared to execute the mission. That night, after packing up his gear, Jules, the team's sniper, was seen sneaking into Jed's assistant's room under the pretense of giving her his special weapon. The assistant was clearly delighted and thanked him. Jules then offered to teach the assistant how to properly hold the weapon. However, this was nothing more than a cover, as Jules was actually trying to flirt with the assistant. Fortunately, the assistant didn't buy Jules' attempts and immediately kicked him out of her room. That incident caused a little commotion, and it was overheard by the rest of the team. At that moment, Eliza, who realized that Jules was up to no good, immediately approached him. She grabbed him by the throat and threatened him with a knife. She then said that she always hated a pervert like Jules, and she warned him never to try anything like that again. The next day, Khalid, the boss of the Iranian mafia, was on his way to sell his nuclear components. However, upon reaching the tunnel, he and his group were stuck in a traffic jam. This turned out to be a trap set by Ben and the others, who were fully prepared to execute their ambush. Without much difficulty, Eliza and Ben quickly managed to eliminate Khalid. They then secured the briefcase containing the nuclear components. After that, they immediately sped away from the location, utterly surprised that the mission was so effortless. However, just a few meters from the tunnel, Ben and his team's vehicle was suddenly struck by an RPG. Although the rocket hit the front of the car, Ben and his entire squad somehow survived. They all quickly exited the vehicle and were immediately attacked by a group of unknown attackers, sparking a fierce firefight. In the middle of the intense gun battle, Major Farouk was shot in the stomach. Seeing his injured teammate, Ben ordered the team to evacuate immediately, taking Major Farouk with them, while he and Eliza would escape through the underground passage with the briefcase containing the nuclear components. Upon reaching the underground passage, Ben and Eliza hurried along to evade their pursuers, but then a shocking betrayal unfolded. Eliza suddenly shot Ben and snatched the briefcase. It was finally revealed that she was a double agent all along, and she was secretly after the component. At the same time, Jed was looking at his cell phone. He felt something was amiss because his phone had been charging all morning, yet the battery was still low. He finally opened the phone and was stunned to find a hacking device attached to it. He instantly realized that there was a mole within his team who was none other than Eliza. Back to Ben, who had just regained consciousness after being shot by Eliza. Fortunately, Eliza's shot had only struck his bulletproof vest. He then quickly chased Eliza, who had not yet gotten very far. On the other hand, Hastings successfully captured one of the previous attacking group members and held him captive in a warehouse. He kept torturing the man, demanding to know who had ordered their attack. However, the man wouldn't talk even though he was being tortured and eventually succumbed to his injury. Meanwhile, Eliza stopped at a hotel to rest for a while. Unbeknownst to her, Ben had already located her and was ready to catch her. Just as she was opening her room door, Ben immediately burst in and held her at gunpoint. Ben demanded to know who Eliza really was and why she had betrayed them. Unfortunately, before she could answer, the two were suddenly attacked again by a group of armed attackers. They were heavily outnumbered, so Ben was forced to work with Eliza to slaughter the attackers. After successfully neutralizing the threat, Ben brought Eliza to the edge of the hotel and forced her to throw her weapon. She then asked her once again about her true identity and who she was actually working for. Eliza finally came clean and revealed that she was a Mossad agent working for Israel. Her mission was never to steal the nuclear component, but rather to find out the true identity of Jed. For some time, her agency had suspected Jed of collaborating with a forbidden organization known as the Shepherd. This shadowy group was an illegal Israeli syndicate aiming to destabilize the world, especially the United States. According to her intelligence, this group was currently attempting to collect various nuclear components for sale without any regard for the global impact. Eliza insisted that she had never intended to betray Ben, pointing out that if she had, she would not have aimed for his bulletproof vest. She then pleaded with Ben not to tell the rest of the team about this, and instead asked for his help in exposing Jed's true intentions. She further explained that she was not the only Mossad agent on the team, as it turned out that Jed's assistant was also working for the Israeli agency. Upon hearing this explanation, Ben finally agreed to help her. After that, they went to an abandoned mall so they could rest there. The next day, Jed's assistant, whose name was Tal, was seen surveilling an apartment belonging to one of the Shepherd's members. Once the target left the place, she quickly entered and planted a tap on his laptop. Just as all the data was successfully transferred to her laptop, the man unfortunately returned and immediately attacked her. She was completely overpowered, but fortunately, she could grab a gun and successfully kill the man. After that, she immediately left the apartment. Meanwhile, Ben and Eliza left in a stolen car. During the drive, Ben asked Eliza if she was certain her cover had not yet been blown to Jed. Eliza simply replied that she didn't know, but she hoped Jed hadn't found out about it. Shortly after, they were stuck in traffic, forcing them to stop. At that moment, a motorcycle pulled up next to their car, placed a bag on the roof, and the car immediately exploded. Fortunately, Ben survived the blast and managed to shoot the motorcyclist. He rushed to check on Eliza, only to find her horribly dead. After the bombing incident, Ben was seen treating his own wounds in a public restroom. He was heartbroken that Eliza had been taken so quickly, especially since they had not yet been able to expose Jed's identity. On the other hand, Tal was seen at a train station. There, she saw a news report on a TV covering the car bombing that killed Eliza. She was shocked to find out that her fellow agent had gone. A while later, Ben returned to Jed's headquarters with the nuclear component he had retrieved from Khalid. The rest of the team were gathered there. That very moment, Ben immediately got straight to the point, asking Jed if he was working with the Shepherd. Jed didn't try to cover the truth, but said that it was a thing of the past, because he left them after realizing they wanted to destroy the world. He then led Ben and the others into another room where they found a man being held captive. Jed explained that the man was the leader of the Shepherd, who had been manipulating him all along. All the attacks that had occurred were orchestrated by this man because he was desperate to collect all the nuclear components. Jed then ordered the man to confess his crimes in front of Ben and the others, and as soon as he made his confession, Jed executed him without a second thought. Shortly after, Jed gave Ben and the rest of the team their final mission. The assignment was to sell the nuclear component Ben was carrying to the Iranian Minister of Defense. He explained that the component would be safer in the hands of the Iranian government. He then said that the exchange was scheduled to take place at an airstrip with the Iranian Minister of Defense the following morning. Right after Jed assigned the mission, Hastings suddenly chose to leave and was pursued by Ben. After catching up with him, Ben asked why Hastings decided to leave them. Hastings replied that he was completely fed up and refused to continue with the team, as he disagreed with Jed's mission to sell the nuclear component to the Iranian government. Ben admitted that he also disagreed, but assured Hastings that he had a different plan in mind. Despite Ben's words, Hastings remained in his decision to leave the team and head back to the US. Ben could not force him to stay, and from that moment on, Hastings officially left the team. On the other hand, Tal was resting in a hotel when she was contacted by her superior, ordering her to stop the investigation into Jed. The reason was that the superior had learned Jed had killed the leader of the Shepherd, meaning that Jed was no longer affiliated with the syndicate. After the call ended, Tal opened the laptop she had previously stolen from a member of the Shepherd. Within the laptop's data, she managed to hack into the communication portal between Jed and the real leader of the Shepherd. Upon seeing that, she finally realized that the man Jed had killed earlier was not the true leader of the syndicate, because Jed was still actively communicating with the actual leader. The next day, Ben, Major Farouk, and Jewel departed to meet the Iranian Minister of Defense. Upon arrival, the minister was already there, accompanied by several guards. Ben, Major Farouk, and Jewel then came out of their car and began the transaction for the nuclear component. The minister immediately checked on the item, and after that, he transferred the money to Major Farouk. Just as Ben, Major Farouk, and Jules were getting back into their car, Ben received a message from Tal containing a photograph of Jed chatting with the actual leader of the Shepherd. The shocking truth was finally exposed. Jed was still a member of the Shepherd. They had deliberately sold the component to the Iranian minister so that Iran could rapidly assemble its nuclear bomb. Once the bomb was ready, their plan was to provoke the minister into attacking the US to trigger World War III. Upon seeing that photo, Ben and his team immediately got out of the car, as they were now determined to retrieve the component from the Iranian Minister of Defense. They quickly opened fire, bombarding the minister's plane with bullets. Fortunately, they successfully eliminated the Iranian Minister of Defense and all of his guards, and immediately retrieved the component. They then left to launch an attack on Jed at the headquarters. However, when they arrived at the base, Jed was already gone. It was not long before Ben discovered a message left by Jed, stating that Ben and the others would soon become fugitives. As it turned out, Jed had created a false narrative, framing Ben and his team as terrorists who had stolen the nuclear component. Soon after Tal arrived, she explained that the situation had become complicated and it was almost impossible for them to capture Jed and the real syndicate leader soon. She then told them to hide separately and assured them that once the situation calmed down, they would hunt down Jed and the real syndicate leader together. Ben, Major Farouk, and Jules agreed with her suggestion and went their separate ways. A month later, it was revealed that James was still at the American base in Iraq. Shortly after, he received a letter from Ben and began reading it. In the letter, Ben recounted his entire story, detailing everything from his discharge from the SEAL to his recruitment by Jed's group. However, Ben explained that he had now become a fugitive after he was framed by Jed as a terrorist. On the other hand, Ben was hiding out in a secluded shack. After a month in isolation, he decided he couldn't keep living as a fugitive and planned to take action. He immediately set some booby traps around his shack and assembled several bombs. He also prepped his weapons, knowing that he was about to start a war. A short while later, Ben intentionally activated his phone and called James. When the call connected, James said that he believed Ben was innocent and told him to stay calm, adding that he was ready to help Ben no matter what happened. Ben thanked him and informed James that a war was about to happen. After calling James, Ben called Tal to tell her it was time for them to get back into action. Tal was strongly against it, saying that the situation was not yet stable, but Ben insisted because he was determined to end everything once and for all. Somewhere else, Jed and the syndicate leader were seen together. At that moment, they finally found Ben's location after tracking his phone signal. However, Ben had done this on purpose, as he had prepared everything to welcome them. At that very moment, Jed immediately dispatched an army to eliminate Ben at his hideout. A few hours later, Ben was seen taking a cigarette while awaiting the Shepherd's army. Sure enough, soon after, dozens of Jed's mercenaries appeared, ready to attack him. He quickly prepared his weaponry, and a war of one against an entire army immediately erupted. Unfortunately, because of the never-ending number of enemies, Ben was quickly overwhelmed and was forced to flee into the woods, but he did not give up. He was relentlessly trying to shoot the enemies who continued their pursuit. However, he eventually collapsed after taking multiple hits. Fortunately, just as his attackers were about to catch him, James and his SEAL team suddenly burst onto the scene, caving the day. After James successfully neutralized all the mercenaries, he immediately brought Ben to treat his gunshot wounds. At that moment, Ben thanked James for coming to his aid. He then asked James to take the briefcase containing the nuclear component, believing it would be much safer in James's hands. Several days later, Ben, Major Farouk, Jules, and Tal were finally reunited. They were discussing their plan for vengeance against Jed and the Shepherd. Tal told them that there were 3 key figures they needed to eliminate to put an end to this crisis. The first was the syndicate leader himself, the second was Jed, and the final target was a man who served as the leader's right-hand man. After the briefing, Ben planned the strategy and gathered more information for their revenge mission. Long story short, Jules was seen disguised as a masseur at a spa. It turned out that the person Jules was massaging was the syndicate's right-hand man, whom Jules quickly eliminated. On the other hand, Major Farouk was monitoring the syndicate's leader from afar. At that moment, the target was watching his son play football. Shortly after, when the leader entered his car, Major Farouk swiftly placed a bomb on the car, causing it to explode and killing the leader. Meanwhile, Jed had just arrived at his house. Unbeknownst to him, Ben was already inside, calmly waiting for him. Seeing Ben there, Jed did not panic in the slightest. He even offered Ben a drink. Ben promised that he would not kill him if he told the truth about why he joined the Shepherd and sold the nuclear component to Iran. Without wasting more time, Jed began his story by explaining that his actions were rooted in revenge. He told Ben that decades ago, his parents were tragically killed in a bomb blast, which was officially blamed on Iranian terrorists. However, the truth was that the bomb had been detonated by American soldiers who wanted to intentionally frame Iran. Since then, Jed became consumed by vengeance. That was why he helped Iran to start their nuclear development, as it would be a real threat to the United States. Using his status as a UN agent, he was able to execute his plan to destroy America. Upon hearing Jed's confession, Ben finally understood the depth of Jed's motivation. However, he maintained that Jed's actions were inexcusable. Just then, police sirens were heard approaching Jed's house. Ben quickly left, telling Jed good luck, as the police were there to arrest him. After meeting Jed, Ben then went to the CIA office to hand over all the recorded evidence of Jed's crimes and clear his own name of all false accusations. A month later, Ben was approached by a man claiming to be the director of the American Special Forces. The man's purpose was to offer Ben a position on his team. Initially, Ben declined, stating he wanted to spend his life sailing around the world. However, the director said that a man like Ben was not meant for sailing, but to defeat the criminals. Upon hearing that, Ben was convinced to accept the offer from the director. Long story short, Ben was seen undergoing a medical examination before officially joining the American Special Forces. After that, Ben was put through a polygraph test, answering several questions given on a computer. In the end, Ben successfully passed all the tests and officially became an American special agent.